This is Buddhist Books Podcast, episode 261, TIPIṭAKA, part 172, Mahāvagga VI, part 7, in which we will continue reading Mahāvagga VI from the Vinaya Piṭaka of the TIPIṭAKA. If you would like to start at the beginning of the TIPIṭAKA, that is the beginning of the three baskets of pre-sectarian early Buddhism, here's the playlist. If you would like to start at the beginning of Buddhist Books Podcast with the introduction that explains all the different... Let's bring these up. It's been a while. So today we're doing pre-sectarian early Buddhism. Other forms of Buddhism covered on Buddhist Books Podcast include Theravada, Mahayana, Tibetan Vajrayana, Japanese Vajrayana, and Zen. So if one of those is more interesting to you than the others, then you can find it on Buddhist Books Podcast by clicking right there and checking out the introduction. So for today, we'll see what happens next. Picking up right where we left off last time. Then the Lord, walking on tour, in due course arrived at Rajagaha. The Lord stayed there at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove at the squirrel's feeding place. At that time there was abundant sugar in Rajagaha. Monks thinking, quote, sugar is allowed by the Lord only to one who is ill, not to one who is not ill, end quote, being scrupulous, did not partake of sugar. They told this matter to the Lord. He said, quote, I allow, monks, sugar for one who is ill, sugar water for one who is not ill, end quote.
Give me sugar and water. Oh.
Thank you, the alien wearing the Edgar suit from Men in Black 1. Anyway, then the Lord, having stayed at Rajagaha for as long as he found suiting, set out on tour for Pataligama, together with the large order of monks, with the 1,250 monks. Then the Lord, walking on tour, in due course arrived at Pataligama. Lay followers at Pataligama heard, quote, it is said that the Lord has reached Pataligama, end quote. Then the lay followers of Pataligama approached the Lord. Having greeted the Lord, they sat down at a respectful distance. The Lord gladdened, rejoiced, roused, delighted the lay followers of Pataligama with talk on Dhamma, as they were sitting down at a respectful distance. Then the lay followers of Pataligama, gladdened, delighted by the Lord with talk on Dhamma, spoke thus to the Lord, quote, Lord, may the Lord consent, parentheses, to come, end parentheses, to our rest house, together with the order of monks, end quote. The Lord consented by becoming silent. Then the lay followers of Pataligama, having understood the Lord's consent, rising from their seats, having greeted the Lord, having kept their right sides towards him, approached that rest house. Having spread that rest house so that a spreading was spread everywhere, having made ready seats, having had a water jar set up, having prepared an oil lamp, approached the Lord. Having approached, having greeted the Lord, they stood at a respectful distance. As they were standing at a respectful distance, the lay followers of Piṭākama spoke thus to the Lord, quote, "The rest house is spread with a spreading everywhere, Lord. Seats are made ready. A water jar is set up. An oil lamp is prepared, Lord. The Lord does that for which it is now the right time." End quote. Then the Lord, dressing in the morning, taking his bowl and robe, approached that rest house together with the order of monks. Having approached, having washed his feet, having entered the rest house, he sat down leaning against a central pillar, facing east. The order of monks, too, having washed their feet, having entered the rest house, sat down leaning against the western wall, facing the east, with the Lord in view. The lay followers of Piṭākama too, having washed their feet, having entered the rest house, sat down leaning against the eastern wall, facing west, with the Lord in view. Then the Lord addressed the lay followers of Piṭākama, saying, quote, "There are 5 disadvantages, householders, to one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit." What 5? Now, householders, one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit, suffers great diminution of wealth owing to sloth. This is the first disadvantage to one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. Then again, householders, an evil reputation is noised abroad of one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. This is the second disadvantage to one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. Then again, householders, if one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. No, you should fall away from wrong moral habit. Just don't fall away from moral habit. It's an important distinction, Edward. Okay, sorry. Approaches any company, whether a company of nobles, a company of Brahmins, a company of householders, a company of recluses, he approaches it diffidently, being ashamed. This is the third disadvantage to one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. Then again, householders, one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit, passes away bewildered. This is the fourth disadvantage to one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. Then again, householders, one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit, at the breaking up of the body after dying arises in the waste, the bad born, the downfall, niraya hell. This is the fifth disadvantage to one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. These, householders, are the 5 disadvantages to one of wrong moral habit, falling away from moral habit. Sometimes I talk. I hope you don't mind. Just a small, simple thing. Quite often, when people are championing Buddhism against their friends on the playground who are, for example, Christian, they might say something like, well, your religion believes in heaven and hell, but we Buddhists don't believe in hell. Unless you ask Lord Buddha in the oldest, most authentic scriptures of the teachings of Buddhism. One of wrong moral habit can be reincarnated in the hell realm. However, the difference is it's temporary. It's a cycle. You'll work your way back up to the higher realms, even into the realm of the gods, and be worshipped for 5,000 years before you're forgotten and fall back down into the hell realms. Is a whole thing. Well, I'm veering away from the text here. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Then again, householders, a lovely reputation is noised abroad of one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit. This is the second advantage. I was inserting in the words being left out. The first advantage to one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit. Okay, I'll try to fill in the 3 dots at the end of every paragraph with that. Just because, who wants to hear me say 3 dots again and again? Then again, householders, if one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit, approaches any company, whether a company of nobles, a company of Brahmins, a company of householders, a company of recluses, he approaches it confidently, not being ashamed. This is the third advantage to one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit. Sorry to interrupt the scripture, but I can't help noticing, perhaps because we have more examples and more information in 2025 than they had in 6th century BC Bihar. This generally, strikes as like 95% of the time true. However, there is that 5% where you have some of the most despicable people who have mastered the art, whether through, self-hypnosis or just being a psychopath, of, walking into a company of Brahmins and nobles, fully confident, hi, everybody, welcome. Oh, even charismatic. And yet inside, they're rotten. Perhaps because in many cases, the company of nobles, or I won't say Brahmins, but let's say, authority figures in whatever context, are themselves full of it. Conversely, you have those of moral habit, those who do their best, far more than most of the people in the world, who lack the confidence to walk into the company of nobles or Brahmins and just sort of feel, especially if they're programmed by the likes of Martin Luther and whatnot, to be overly humble, to hold humility, performative humility as a virtue to signal. Anyway, sorry. I'll try not to talk too much. Yes. Then again, householders, one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit, passes away unbewildered. This is the fourth advantage to one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit. Then again, householders, one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit, at the breaking up of the body after dying, arises in the happy born, in a heaven world. This is the fifth advantage to one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit. These, householders, are the 5 advantages to one of moral habit, accomplished in moral habit. End quote. All right. To the Buddhist child, bragging about how much better his religion is than Christianity to the Christians on the playground. There is one thing that you can point to that is clearly superior. It's based on your moral habit, based on your character, based on your actions in life that determines whether you go to heaven or hell. Whereas in Christianity, it's solely based on whether you accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. So people who do good but don't accept Jesus, hell. People who do bad, accept Jesus, heaven. That's the weird loophole that people manage to carve out the teachings of Yeshua in mainstream, exoteric, institutionalized Christianity. I know, it's weird. That's why we're Buddhist. Anyway, no, not the only reason. When the Lord had gladdened, rejoiced, roused, delighted the lay followers of Pataligama far into the night with talk on Dhamma, he dismissed them, saying, quote, "The night is now far spent, householders. Now do that for whatever it is in the right time." End quote. Quote, "Yes, Lord." End quote. And the lay followers of Pataligama, having answered the Lord in assent, rising from their seats, having greeted the Lord, departed, keeping their right sides towards him. Then the Lord, soon after the lay followers of Pataligama had departed, entered into solitude. Now at that time, Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers of Magad, were building a (fortified) town at Pataligama for repelling the Vajis. Vajjis. It's before my time. Anyway, then the Lord, getting up at the end of that night, towards them saw with Deva sight, pure and surpassing that of men, many Devatas, occupying the sites at Pataligama. Now in whatever region powerful Devatas occupy sites, they bend the minds of powerful kings and the king's chief ministers to build dwellings there. In whatever region Devatas of middling (power) occupy sites, they bend the minds of kings of middling (power) and the king's chief ministers to build dwellings there. In whatever region Devatas of lowly (power) occupy sites, they bend the minds of kings of lowly (power) and the king's chief ministers to build dwellings there. Then the Lord addressed the Venerable Ananda, saying, quote, "Now who, Ananda, are these who are building a (fortified) town at Pataligama?" End quote. Quote, "Sunidha and Vasakara, Lord, chief ministers in Magad, for repelling the Vajis." End quote. Quote, "As though, Ananda, having consulted together with the Devas of the 30, even so, Ananda, do Sunidha and Vasakara, chief ministers in Magad, build a (fortified) town at Pataligama for repelling the Vajis. Now I, Ananda, getting up at the end of this night towards dawn, saw with Deva sight 3 dots. Remember that whole thing where he saw with Davis Heights, and it's the thing with all that stuff. That's 3 dots. Polytech Society. Thank you, Polytech Society. Doesn't like repeating themselves, so they replace things with 3 dots. In whatever region devatas of lowly, parentheses, power, and parentheses, occupy sites, they bend the minds of kings of lowly, parentheses, power, and parentheses, and the king's chief ministers to build dwellings there. Ananda, as far as the Aryan region extends, there's a footnote. As far as the place where the Aryan people go. Oh, thanks, footnote. Extends as in parentheses. As far as there is trading, this will be a leading town, Pataliputta. What was it called before? Pataligama. Now it's Pataliputta. All right. Modern-day Patna. Oh. All right. Where there was the breaking of the seed boxes. But Ananda, there's a whole thing about the seed boxes, and I don't know if I want to read that. But Ananda, there will be 3 dangers to Pataliputta, from fire or from water or from internal dissension. End quote. The big 3. Then Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers in Magadha, approached the Lord. Having approached, they exchanged friendly greetings with the Lord. Having exchanged greetings of friendliness and courtesy, they stood at a respectful distance. As they were standing at a respectful distance, Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers in Magadha, spoke thus to the Lord, quote, "May the revered Gautama, together with the order of monks, consent to a meal with us today." End quote. The Lord consented by remaining silent. This establishes a bad precedent. If somebody remains silent, it's not necessarily consent, guys. It's neither here nor there. Then Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers in Magadha, departed, having understood the Lord's consent. Then Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers in Magadha, having had sumptuous solid food and soft food prepared, had the time announced to the Lord, saying, quote, "It is time, good Gautama, the meal is ready." End quote. Then the Lord, having dressed in the morning, taking his bowl and robe, approached the food distribution of Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers in Magadha. Having approached, he sat down together with the order of monks on the appointed seat. Then Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers in Magadha, having with their own hands served and satisfied with sumptuous food, solid and soft, the order of monks with the awakened one at its head, when the Lord had eaten and had withdrawn his hand from his bowl, sat down at a respectful distance, and as Sunidha and Vasikara, chief ministers in Magadha, were sitting down at a respectful distance, the Lord gave thanks in these verses. Quote, "Wherever the prudent man shall take up his abode, having offered food to those here of moral habit, good Brahmafarers. If he makes an offering to those devatas who may be there, these revered do revere, honored do honor him. Hence they sympathize with him as a mother with her own child. The man with whom devatas sympathize ever sees good luck. End quote. Interesting thing to note here is that while the basic Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path and all of that, they're present in present day. It's popular, and I'm not saying it's bad. It's good for those for whom it becomes more accessible. What am I talking about? What I'm saying is that there are many non-spiritually inclined, atheist, reason-minded, science and reason, ephemerally based, in other words, only what you can touch, what you can experience with your senses is real to them. And even things that you experience with your senses that are considered hallucinatory or something like that. Like if they wake up from a dream, they'll say, oh, that was just a dream. It wasn't real. Folks such as these are in present day coming to a form of Buddhism which has been stripped of all elements of religion, spirituality, myth, or anything that would be incompatible with a post-enlightenment, Western sort of thinker. And that's good because, it helps people a lot to learn to live without attachment. They're not doing it so that they can be born in this realm or that realm. Most often they think that they'll cease to exist entirely at the point of death. But they're able to find a greater degree of peace and happiness in life through the teachings of Lord Buddha. However, when their children are on the playground, they may make statements such as, in Buddhism, they don't believe in gods or making offerings to spirits or any of this Hindu stuff or any of this pagan stuff or any of this, Catholic stuff. Do you ever put incense in front of a saint? Maybe not. But anyway, the point is, here Lord Buddha is saying, hey, if you got spirits on your land, give honor to the spirits, and then the spirits will honor you, and then you'll have good luck. Maybe he might add, don't get too attached to the spirits or to the luck, because that's sort of Buddhist, right? But I'm learning these things as I'm going, so I'm sharing some of the little footnotes that I'm making in my mind as I read. Then the Lord, having in these verses given thanks to Sudina and Vasakara. Thank you, Sudina and Vasakara. It's been nice. Chief ministers in Magad. Harriet Jones. Yes, we know who you are. Sorry. Rising from his seat, departed. Then Sunita and Vasakara, chief ministers in Magad, following close behind the Lord, thought, quote, by whichever gate the recluse Gautama goes out today, that shall be called Gautama's gate. By whichever ford he crosses the river Ganga, or as it says here, Ganges. The British like to make things their own, put their own name on things, crosses the river Ganges, Ganga. That shall be called Gautama's ford, end quote. And whichever ford he drives away in, that'll be called Gautama's truck. That part wasn't in the text. I made that up for comedic, feebly attempted. According to, end quote, accordingly, the gate by which the Lord departed came to be called Gautama's gate. Then the Lord approached the river Ganges. Now at that time the river Ganges was full, level with the banks, so that a crow could drink, parentheses, from it, end parentheses. That footage was from a video that I made when we visited Rishikesh. And I don't know if it was during the flood, but the river was looking pretty intense there, wasn't it? If you would like, either now or later, you can check out my travel series on my other channel, my channel called Edward Reeb. That was the channel where Buddhist books started. This Buddhist books, of which there are now 261 episodes, started out as a playlist on the Edward Reeb channel and then became its own channel later. Anyway, since they were desirous of going from the hither to the further, parentheses, bank, and parentheses, some people looked about for a boat, some looked about for a float. Is this Dr. Seuss? Others put together a raft. The Lord saw these people, of whom some were looking about for a boat, some were looking about for a float. Others were putting together a raft, since they were desirous of going from the hither to the further, parentheses, bank, end parentheses. Seeing them, as a strong man might stretch out his bent arm or might bend back his outstretched arm, even so did he, vanishing from the hither bank of the river Ganges, reappear on the further bank together with the order of monks. Then the Lord understood this matter. At the time uttered this solemn utterance, quote, "Those cross the deeps, the rivers, making a bridge, spanning the swamps. See, people tie their rafts, but crossed over are the wise." End quote. All right. So, there it is. It does remind me of a couple of things. Prior to Lord Buddha's day, TIPIṭAKA was a word used in the same region that he was in, which meant spiritual ford, and was a title given to certain enlightened masters in a Jainist context. And in the Heart Sutra, it talks about gone to the other shore, thoroughly to the other shore, enlightened. So perhaps in that little scene there where Lord Buddha approaches the Ganga and then beams, for those familiar with Star Trek, or teleports, say something happens where 12,000 monks, was it 1,200 or 12,000? A lot of monks disappeared from one side of the Ganga and reappeared on the other. And while some folks are tying their rafts, they're on the other side. I wonder if there's a connection. I wonder if tying your raft is a little bit like making an offering to the spirits of the land and receiving good blessings in return. Nah, maybe not. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's recital. I don't claim to, know all the ins and outs and all the subtle meanings of all this. I every once in a while I have to remind you, because sometimes people come on and complain that I'm not a very good teacher. I'm not a teacher. I'm just reading this aloud, because not everybody has the English translation of the Pali Scriptures of the TIPIṭAKA, and I happen to have them, and I thought you might want to hear them. If you are a person of means, then you can go to this address and order yourself. They ship them all over the world. Order yourself a copy of the TIPIṭAKA. Otherwise, you can go to this address, archive.org, and you can search for TIPIṭAKA. Someone went through and scanned every page of all these books, and so if you don't mind staring at a screen for half your life, you can read them on your own. Otherwise, you can hit like and subscribe on this channel, and you can hear me recite every word of the Pali Scriptures of the TIPIṭAKA. Just for fun, I'm going to leave you with a different end screen than the usual end screen. My dad taught me a particular Buddhist chanting meditative practice when I was very young, and I shared it on a different channel, and then yesterday, for one reason or another, I took the part at the end of that episode where I had shared it and made it its own video. So it's a video called That Thing My Dad Taught Me When I Was 6. It's that thing my dad taught me when I was 6. To me, it's important. To the world, I don't know how important it is. You can watch it. You can decide if it's something you want to add to your life or to go, weird. It's up to you, as always. I will go ahead and do the usual closing, which comes from that practice. And it goes like this. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace. Until next time.